The First World War was unlike any conflict that came before it. Brutal trench warfare ravaged Europe and decimated a generation of young men. New technologies of war like machine guns and poison gas made the battlefield a terrifying hellscape where death came swiftly and indiscriminately. The old world order crumbled under the weight of the conflict, and empires that had stood for centuries collapsed. The war's end brought little solace, as a deadly influenza pandemic swept the globe, killing millions more. In the aftermath, a sense of disillusionment and despair settled over much of the world. The United States, though initially hesitant to join the fray, emerged from the war as a global power. The conflict had spared the nation from the widespread physical destruction that ravaged Europe, and its economy boomed as it supplied war materials to the Allied powers. American factories hummed with activity, churning out weapons, ammunition, and other goods. The demand for labor drew millions of Americans from rural areas to industrial centers, transforming the social fabric of the nation. As the war ended and American soldiers returned home, they found a nation eager to embrace a new era of prosperity and progress. Yet, beneath the surface of this newfound prosperity, a current of unease ran through American society. The war had shattered many long-held beliefs about progress and civilization. The horrors of the trenches had exposed the fragility of human life and the depths of human cruelty. Traditional values seemed quaint and outdated in the face of such profound change. The younger generation, in particular, felt a sense of restlessness and discontent. Many yearned for a break from the past, a chance to create a new world free from the constraints of tradition. Out of this maelstrom of change and uncertainty emerged a period of remarkable cultural and social ferment. The Roaring Twenties, as the decade would come to be known, was a time of unprecedented economic growth, technological innovation, and artistic expression. It was an era of flappers and jazz, of speakeasies and bootleggers, of gangsters and silent film stars. It was a time of liberation and experimentation as Americans embraced new freedoms and challenged old norms. But it was also a time of great social and economic inequality as the gap between the rich and the poor widened and racial tensions simmered beneath the surface of society. The soundtrack to this era of change and upheaval was jazz, a new form of music that seemed to embody the energy and spirit of the age. Born in the African-American communities of New Orleans, jazz was a fusion of African rhythms, European harmonies, and American improvisation. It was music that pulsed with life, a frenetic blend of brass, reeds, and percussion that defied easy categorization. Jazz was music for dancing, for celebration, for losing oneself in the moment. As jazz spread northward from its New Orleans roots, it was picked up by white musicians and audiences alike. The music crossed racial boundaries, becoming a symbol of the era's newfound freedoms and its rejection of Victorian-era constraints. Jazz clubs sprang up in cities across the country, offering a place where people could gather to listen to the latest sounds, dance the Charleston and the Black Bottom, and indulge in illegal liquor. The music became synonymous with the Roaring Twenties, a soundtrack to a decade of change, rebellion, and excess. But jazz was more than just dance music. It was also a powerful form of artistic expression, reflecting the complexities and contradictions of the age. The music's improvisational nature gave musicians the freedom to explore a wide range of emotions, from joy and exuberance to sorrow and despair. Jazz could be both celebratory and mournful, raucous and introspective. It was a music that captured the spirit of an era grappling with the aftermath of war, the rapid pace of social change, and the enduring legacy of racism and inequality. In the summer of 1922, F. Scott Fitzgerald, a young writer with a keen eye for the excesses and anxieties of the jazz age, set his sights on Long Island, New York. This stretch of coastline, just across the East River from Manhattan, had become a playground for the newly rich, a place where sprawling mansions rose from the sand dunes and lavish parties lit up the night. Fitzgerald was drawn to the glamour and extravagance of this world, but he was also acutely aware of the emptiness and disillusionment that lay beneath its glittering surface. Fitzgerald's masterpiece, The Great Gatsby, published in 1925, captured both the allure and the illusion of the American dream in the Jazz Age. The novel tells the story of Jay Gatsby, a self-made millionaire who throws lavish parties at his West Egg mansion in the hopes of winning back his former love, Daisy Buchanan. Gatsby's relentless pursuit of Daisy and his belief that he can repeat the past blinds him to the realities of the world around him. Through the eyes of Nick Carraway, a young Midwesterner who rents a cottage next door to Gatsby, Fitzgerald paints a vivid portrait of a society consumed by materialism, obsessed with status and teetering on the brink of moral collapse. The novel explores themes of love, loss, class, social mobility, and the corrupting influence of wealth. It is a story about the elusiveness of the American dream and the dangers of clinging to illusions in a world where the past can never truly be recaptured. Nick Carraway, a young man from the Midwest, arrives in West Egg, Long Island in the summer of 1922. He is fresh out of Yale and eager to make his mark on the world. Drawn by the allure of the booming bond business, he rents a modest cottage on the shores of Long Island Sound, finding himself in the midst of a social whirl unlike anything he's ever known. Across the bay, the mansions of East Egg shimmer in the sunlight, home to the established wealth and social prestige of families like the Buchanans. Nick's cousin Daisy lives across the Sound with her husband Tom in a world of old money and casual elegance. Nick, a quiet and observant young man, is both fascinated and repelled by the excesses of West Egg. He attends Gatsby's lavish parties, marveling at the sheer opulence of it all. Champagne flows freely, jazz music spills out from the mansion, and guests dance the night away under a canopy of twinkling lights. Yet beneath the surface of gaiety, Nick senses a profound sadness, a yearning for something more. Gatsby, the enigmatic host of these extravagant affairs, remains an enigma, a cipher, who seems to float above the revelry he creates. Nick is drawn into this world of wealth and privilege, but he is also an outsider, a detached observer who sees through the facades and pretenses of those around him. He is repulsed by the casual cruelty and moral indifference of the wealthy elite. He sees the emptiness behind their glittering facades, the hollowness of their pursuits. As he navigates this new world, Nick becomes the moral compass of the story, a voice of reason and decency in a world teetering on the edge of chaos. West Egg, with its ostentatious displays of wealth, stands in stark contrast to the understated elegance of East Egg. Gatsby's mansion, a sprawling edifice of Gothic towers and glittering windows, is the epitome of West Egg extravagance. It is a monument to Gatsby's ambition, a symbol of his newfound wealth and his yearning for a life beyond his reach. Every Saturday night, Gatsby throws lavish parties, inviting hundreds of guests to revel in his opulent world. The parties are legendary, fueled by bootleg liquor, pulsating with the rhythms of jazz and attended by a motley crew of social climbers, aspiring artists and bored socialites. Gatsby's parties are a spectacle to behold, a mesmerizing blend of music, laughter and intoxicating excess. Guests dance the Charleston and the Black Bottom, their movements a blur of flapper dresses and tuxedos. Champagne flows freely from fountains, and the air is thick with the scent of expensive perfume and cigar smoke. Yet, beneath the surface of revelry, there is an air of desperation, a sense that these parties are more about escape than genuine enjoyment. The guests, for all their gaiety, seem lost in their own worlds, their laughter tinged with a hint of hysteria. Gatsby himself remains a distant figure, a mysterious host who observes the festivities from the periphery. He is the subject of endless rumors and speculation, but few can claim to know the man behind the carefully constructed persona. Some whisper that he made his fortune in bootlegging, others that he was a German spy during the war. Gatsby does little to dispel these rumors, preferring to cultivate an air of mystery around himself. To Nick, Gatsby is an enigma, a man who seems to be both present and absent, deeply invested in his parties, yet strangely detached from the revelry. Across the Sound, the mansions of East Egg stand as a silent rebuke to the ostentatious displays of West Egg. The homes here are grand but understated, their elegance rooted in generations of wealth and social standing. East Egg is a world of inherited privilege, where families like the Buchanans move with an air of effortless superiority. Tom Buchanan, Daisy's husband, embodies the entitled arrogance of East Egg. He is a man of imposing stature and inherited wealth, a former college athlete who has never had to work for anything in his life. Tom is accustomed to getting what he wants, and he expects nothing less from the world around him. Daisy, Nick's cousin, is a beautiful and enigmatic figure, trapped in a loveless marriage to Tom. She possesses a captivating charm, a voice that Nick describes as full of money, but there is a sadness in her eyes, a sense of disillusionment that belies her outward gaiety. Daisy is a product of her upbringing, a woman who has been taught to value wealth and social standing above all else. She is drawn to Gatsby's world of glamour and excitement, but she is also tethered to the security and familiarity of her life with Tom. Nick's first encounter with Tom and Daisy takes place at their stately mansion, a world away from the frenetic energy of Gatsby's parties. The atmosphere is one of stifling formality, the conversation polite but superficial. As the afternoon wears on, Nick becomes aware of the underlying tensions that simmer beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect lives. He senses a coldness between Tom and Daisy, a lack of genuine affection. When Tom steps away to take a phone call, Jordan Baker, a friend of Daisy's, leans in to whisper a startling revelation. Daisy and Gatsby were once in love. As Nick becomes more deeply entwined in the lives of Gatsby, Daisy, and Tom, he finds himself increasingly troubled by the contradictions he observes. The world he has entered is one of both immense wealth and profound moral poverty. The characters he encounters are driven by a relentless pursuit of pleasure and status, yet they seem incapable of finding true happiness or fulfillment. Gatsby, for all his wealth and possessions, remains haunted by the loss of Daisy. His pursuit of her, a desperate attempt to recapture a past that can never be fully reclaimed. The contrast between the glittering facades of West Egg and East Egg and the underlying despair of its inhabitants is thrown into sharp relief by the presence of the Valley of Ashes, a desolate wasteland that lies between West Egg and New York City. This industrial dumping ground, a stark reminder of the human cost of the Roaring Twenties excesses, is home to George Wilson, a struggling garage owner, and his wife Myrtle, Tom Buchanan's mistress. The Wilsons' world is one of poverty and desperation, a stark counterpoint to the carefree indulgence of the wealthy elite. In the Valley of Ashes, Nick witnesses firsthand the destructive consequences of Tom Buchanan's recklessness and infidelity. Tom's affair with Myrtle is a cruel charade, a way for him to assert his power and dominance over a woman who is trapped in a loveless marriage and desperate for a way out. The scene in the Wilsons' cramped apartment, where Tom breaks Myrtle's nose in a fit of jealous rage, is a brutal reminder of the casual cruelty that underpins the lives of the wealthy and privileged. Behind the glitter, there's Gatsby's enigmatic persona, J. Gatsby. The name itself seemed to shimmer with an almost mythical quality, whispered in hushed tones at his lavish parties, debated in hushed voices on the porches of West Egg cottages. He was a man cloaked in enigma, an enigma meticulously crafted and presented to the world like a stage production. His wealth was evident, his generosity legendary, his parties the stuff of whispered legend. Yet behind the perfectly tailored suits, the dazzling smile, and the carefully curated air of casual affluence, Gatsby remained an enigma. Nick, despite his proximity to the man, found himself constantly questioning the reality of Jay Gatsby. The rumors were too fantastical, the whispers too contradictory to paint a complete picture. Was he a self-made millionaire, as he claimed? Or was his fortune built on a foundation of bootlegging and other illicit activities? Was his past as a decorated war hero, as he alluded to? Or did it hold darker secrets, whispers of a life lived on the edge of legality? Nick, observant and increasingly drawn into the orbit of Gatsby's world, studied the man at every opportunity. He noted the meticulous care with which Gatsby crafted his image, the practiced ease with which he navigated social situations, the way his eyes seemed to hold a perpetual longing, a yearning for something just beyond his grasp. Gatsby, Nick realized, was a master of illusion, but what truth lay beneath the carefully constructed facade? The mystery of Jay Gatsby was a subject of endless fascination and speculation among the inhabitants of West Egg and beyond. At his lavish parties, guests fueled by bootleg gin and an insatiable hunger for gossip traded rumors in hushed tones. Was he, as some claimed, a German spy during the Great War, his fortune amassed through espionage and intrigue? Others whispered of a more sinister past, a rumor that Gatsby had once killed a man, his wealth a blood-stained testament to a past he desperately sought to outrun. Even those who claimed to know Gatsby best, like his shadowy business associate Meyer Wolfsheim, seemed to dance around the truth of his origins. Wolfsheim, a man who seemed to exist in the shadowy periphery of legality, spoke of Gatsby with a mixture of admiration and caution, hinting at a past shrouded in secrecy. He was a man, Wolfsheim implied, who had risen from humble beginnings to achieve extraordinary wealth and influence. But the path he had taken was not one to be discussed in polite company. The more Nick heard, the more elusive Gatsby's true identity seemed to become. He was a phantom, a figment of 1,000 whispered rumors, a blank canvas onto which others projected their own fantasies and aspirations. The truth, Nick suspected, lay buried somewhere beneath layers of carefully constructed artifice, a truth that Gatsby himself was determined to keep hidden, even as he desperately sought to rewrite his past and reshape his destiny. Every Saturday night, Gatsby's mansion transformed into a dazzling spectacle of music, laughter, and intoxicating excess. The air throbbed with the rhythms of a live jazz band, the intoxicating melodies of the saxophone and the trumpet blending seamlessly with the clinking of champagne glasses and the excited chatter of hundreds of guests. The gardens, illuminated by 1,000 twinkling lights, became a kaleidoscope of color and movement, as flapper dresses swirled and men in white flannels and boaters exchanged stories and laughter. Gatsby spared no expense in creating these lavish affairs. Champagne flowed freely from fountains, its golden effervescence mirroring the giddy atmosphere of the night. Caterers arrived with trays laden with delicacies, mountains of caviar and oysters, platters piled high with roasted meats and exotic fruits. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfumes, mingling with the aroma of cigar smoke and the intoxicating fragrance of night-blooming jasmine. Yet, beneath the surface of gaiety and extravagance, Nick sensed a profound emptiness at the heart of Gatsby's parties. The guests, for all their revelry, seemed to be performing for one another, their laughter tinged with a hint of hysteria, their conversations a whirlwind of gossip and superficiality. They were drawn to Gatsby's world by the promise of glamour and excitement, but few seemed to possess any genuine connection to the man himself or to understand the driving force behind his lavish hospitality. At the edge of Gatsby's sprawling lawn, overlooking the dark expanse of the Sound, stood a solitary green light, a beacon shining from the end of Daisy Buchanan's dock across the water. To Nick it seemed a poignant symbol of Gatsby's elusive dream, a tangible representation of the past he desperately sought to recapture. Every night Gatsby stood on his lawn, his arms outstretched, his gaze fixed on that distant light, as if willing it to bridge the chasm of time and circumstance that separated him from the object of his yearning. The green light, Nick came to realize, represented more than just Gatsby's longing for Daisy. It embodied the allure of the American dream itself, the promise of a better future, the tantalizing possibility of reinventing oneself and escaping the constraints of the past. It was a symbol of hope and aspiration, but also a reminder of the fragility of dreams and the often cruel whims of fate. Gatsby, with his unwavering faith in the power of wealth and his unshakable belief that the past could be repeated, clung to the green light as a lifeline, a beacon guiding him through the darkness of his present circumstances. He had built his entire life around the pursuit of this dream, believing that if he could just recreate the past, he could finally find happiness and fulfillment. Yet, as Nick observed the yearning in Gatsby's eyes, the way his entire being seemed to reach out towards that distant light, he couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding, a growing certainty that Gatsby's pursuit of his impossible dream would ultimately lead him down a path of heartbreak and despair. The revelation of Gatsby's past love for Daisy hung in the air like a ghost, a tangible presence in the opulent yet strangely sterile atmosphere of the Buchanan's East Egg mansion. Nick, still absorbing the weight of Jordan's whispered confession, found himself caught in the undertow of Gatsby's carefully orchestrated plan. Gatsby, it seemed, had been waiting for this moment, his entire life a meticulously crafted stage set for Daisy's return. The invitation was casual, almost offhand. Gatsby, with his characteristic air of effortless charm, suggested a simple afternoon tea at Nick's cottage, a chance encounter, a casual reunion of old acquaintances. Yet Nick, now privy to the depths of Gatsby's yearning, recognized the carefully calculated nature of the request. Gatsby, for all his outward confidence, was a man poised on the precipice of a dream, his hopes hinging on this single, carefully orchestrated meeting. The weight of Gatsby's expectation pressed down on Nick, a tangible burden of responsibility for a reunion he barely understood. He agreed, of course, drawn into the orbit of Gatsby's longing, unable to resist the pull of a story that seemed destined for either glorious triumph or heart-wrenching tragedy. The date was set, the wheels of fate set in motion, and Nick found himself an unwitting accomplice in a love story 5 years in the making. The day of Daisy's arrival dawned heavy with the weight of anticipation. Nick, at Gatsby's insistence, had spent the morning transforming his modest garden into a scene of almost absurd extravagance. Flowers, seemingly gathered from every florist on Long Island, overflowed from vases, their perfume thick in the humid air. The lawn, meticulously manicured, resembled a swathe of emerald velvet, its perfection a testament to Gatsby's obsessive desire to control every detail of the reunion. Inside the cottage, Gatsby paced, his usual composure shattered by a torrent of nervous energy. He adjusted the placement of a vase, straightened a picture on the wall, his movements betraying the inner turmoil that belied his carefully cultivated air of nonchalance. He fussed over his appearance, changing his shirt multiple times, each one a different shade of perfection, as if attempting to clothe himself in an illusion of effortless grace. Nick, observing Gatsby's descent into anxiety, found himself both amused and strangely touched by the vulnerability the man displayed. For all his wealth and social standing, Gatsby was revealed as a man stripped bare by the force of his own longing, his carefully constructed facade crumbling in the face of a love that had haunted him for years. The air crackled with unspoken tension, the silence punctuated by the ticking of the clock as the appointed hour drew near. The air hung thick with unspoken tension as Daisy, accompanied by the perpetually sardonic Jordan Baker, arrived at Nick's cottage. Gatsby, his face pale beneath his carefully cultivated tan, seemed to shrink back into the shadows, his carefully rehearsed greetings dissolving into a jumble of awkward stammering. Daisy, for her part, seemed equally ill at ease, her usual composure faltering under the weight of the past resurrected. The conversation, punctuated by long, uncomfortable silences, danced around the edges of their shared history. Memories half forgotten and tinged with the bittersweet ache of what might have been, hovered in the air like ghosts. Nick, sensing the need for a strategic retreat, excused himself, leaving Gatsby and Daisy alone in the stifling confines of his over-decorated living room. The rain, as if mirroring the emotional turbulence of the reunion, began to fall, a steady drumming against the windows that heightened the sense of isolation within the cottage. Nick, peering through the window, saw Gatsby and Daisy silhouetted against the grey light, their postures stiff, their faces unreadable. The past, it seemed, had lost none of its power to wound, its presence a tangible barrier between them. As the rain continued to fall, washing away the pretense of a casual afternoon tea, Gatsby, in a moment of desperation, invited Daisy and Nick to tour his mansion. The invitation was an attempt to recapture control, to dazzle Daisy with the tangible evidence of his success, to prove, perhaps even to himself, that he had finally achieved the life he had so meticulously constructed for her return. The tour began awkwardly, Gatsby leading the way with a forced gaiety that did little to mask the underlying tension. He pointed out the mansion's extravagant features, the cavernous ballroom, the library with its real uncut books, the swimming pool shimmering like an oasis of turquoise silk, each one a testament to his wealth and, by extension, his love for Daisy. Yet, as the tour progressed, Gatsby's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. He knocked over a clock, his hand trembling as he attempted to write it. He stumbled over his words, his carefully rehearsed speeches dissolving into awkward stammering. The illusion of effortless grace, so painstakingly cultivated, shattered, revealing the raw vulnerability of a man desperate for a love that seemed increasingly beyond his grasp. The following day, the shimmering illusion of Gatsby's world seemed to evaporate under the oppressive heat of a sweltering July sun. Tom, his face etched with a mixture of boredom and barely concealed malice, announced a change of plans. They would be venturing into the city, he declared, a casual suggestion that held the weight of a command. Gatsby, his eyes fixed on Daisy, agreed readily, eager to prolong the fragile bubble of their reunion. Nick, sensing an undercurrent of unease, reluctantly joined the party. Their journey took them through a desolate landscape that stood in stark contrast to the manicured lawns and opulent mansions of West Egg and East Egg. The Valley of Ashes, as it was known, was a wasteland of industrial refuse, a desolate expanse of smouldering garbage heaps and grimy factories that seemed to stretch endlessly towards the horizon. The air hung heavy with the stench of burning refuse, a suffocating miasma that seemed to cling to their clothes and skin. As their chauffeured cars sped through this desolate landscape, Nick felt a growing sense of unease. a disquieting feeling that they were crossing a threshold into a darker, more sinister realm. The eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, a faded billboard advertisement for an oculist, loomed over the scene, their giant, disembodied gaze seeming to follow their every move. It was as if they were being watched, judged by some unseen presence that saw through their carefully constructed facades and recognized the emptiness that lay beneath their gilded lives. Myrtle Wilson, a life consumed by longing and deception. Their destination, it turned out, was a dilapidated garage on the edge of the Valley of Ashes, a grim testament to the dreams that had withered and died in this forgotten corner of the world. The garage was owned by George Wilson, a lifeless, defeated man with haunted eyes and a perpetually greasy jumpsuit. His wife Myrtle was a different story altogether. Myrtle Wilson was a woman consumed by a desperate longing for a life beyond the confines of her dreary existence. She possessed a raw, almost desperate beauty, her vitality a stark contrast to the lifelessness of her surroundings. She greeted Tom with a familiarity that spoke volumes about the nature of their relationship. Her eyes alight with a mixture of desire and defiance. Myrtle, clad in a flamboyant dress that clashed garishly with the drabness of the garage, seemed to blossom under Tom's attention. She chattered incessantly, her words tumbling over each other in their haste to escape, her voice a strange mixture of naivete and world-weariness. She spoke of her dreams of escaping the Valley of Ashes, of becoming someone new, someone worthy of a life filled with beauty and excitement. Nick, observing her with a mixture of pity and revulsion, couldn't help but feel that Myrtle, like Gatsby, was clinging to a dream that was destined to crumble into dust. Tom Buchanan moved through the world with the casual arrogance of a man who had never known want or doubt. He was a man of privilege and power, accustomed to getting what he wanted when he wanted it, regardless of the consequences. His affair with Myrtle Wilson was simply another conquest, a way to assert his dominance over a woman who was desperate for his attention and blind to the shallowness of his affections. Tom, with his inherited wealth and his air of unchallenged authority, seemed to embody the moral bankruptcy that Nick found so repellent in the world he had entered. He treated those around him with a mixture of condescension and contempt, his words laced with a casual cruelty that betrayed his utter lack of empathy. He saw the world as his playground, its inhabitants as mere pawns to be manipulated for his own amusement. The scene in the cramped, airless apartment above the garage, where Tom had installed Myrtle as his mistress, was a study in contrasts. Tom, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and luxury, seemed ill at ease in the cramped, sparsely furnished rooms. Myrtle, on the other hand, seemed to blossom in this artificial world, her laughter echoing through the apartment as she played the role of the carefree mistress. Nick, observing the scene with a growing sense of disgust, couldn't help but feel that he was witnessing a slow-motion train wreck, a collision of worlds that could only end in disaster. The afternoon descended into a hazy blur of bootleg gin, forced gaiety, and simmering resentment. Tom's friends, a collection of jaded socialites and hangers-on, arrived at the apartment, their laughter echoing hollowly in the cramped space. The air grew thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of cheap perfume, the atmosphere a bizarre parody of the elegance of Gatsby's parties. Myrtle, fueled by gin and a desperate desire to please Tom, became increasingly reckless. She paraded around the apartment in a state of giddy intoxication, her laughter growing louder, her movements more exaggerated, as if attempting to convince herself and everyone else that she truly belonged in this world of wealth and privilege. She spoke of Gatsby with a mixture of envy and disdain, her words a reminder of the social chasm that separated them from the glittering world of West Egg. As the afternoon wore on, the tension in the room crackled like static electricity. Tom, his face flushed with anger, grew increasingly irritated by Myrtle's behavior. When she dared to utter Daisy's name, his restraint snapped. In one swift, brutal motion, he struck her, his fist connecting with her face with a sickening thud. The sound of her cry, a mixture of pain and disbelief, seemed to hang in the air long after the laughter had died away. The rain, a relentless torrent that seemed to mirror the emotional turmoil of the afternoon, had finally ceased. Sunlight, filtering through the clouds, bathed the landscape in a soft, ethereal glow, as if washing away the awkwardness of the reunion and offering the promise of a new beginning. Gatsby, sensing a shift in the atmosphere, seized the opportunity to showcase the true extent of his devotion to Daisy. He invited her and Nick on a tour of his mansion, a testament to his love, a tangible expression of the life he had built in her absence. As they stepped through the imposing front doors, Daisy gasped, her eyes widening in astonishment. Gatsby, a triumphant smile playing on his lips, watched her reaction closely, eager to erase the memory of the awkward encounter in Nick's cramped cottage. The mansion, no longer a distant silhouette glimpsed from across the bay, revealed itself in all its extravagant glory. The foyer, a cavernous space of polished marble and glittering chandeliers, seemed to swallow sound, creating an atmosphere of hushed reverence. A sweeping staircase, its banister crafted from gleaming mahogany, led to an upper floor that promised endless possibilities. Gatsby, his every gesture imbued with the confidence of a man who had achieved the impossible, extended his arm, inviting Daisy to step into his world. The tour unfolded like a carefully choreographed ballet, each room more opulent than the last. Gatsby, eager to impress Daisy, led her through a seemingly endless succession of spaces designed to showcase his wealth and, by extension, his worthiness of her love. They wandered through a library lined with real uncut books, their leather bindings a testament to Gatsby's desire for authenticity in a world of artifice. They marveled at the ballroom, its polished floor reflecting the glittering chandeliers, its emptiness a silent reminder of the countless parties that had been thrown in Daisy's honor, parties she had never attended. Gatsby, his voice filled with a boyish enthusiasm that belied the carefully calculated nature of the display, flung open doors, revealing walk-in closets filled with silk shirts in every color imaginable, a swimming pool that shimmered like an oasis of turquoise silk, a dining room set for a banquet fit for royalty, each room meticulously designed to evoke an atmosphere of effortless luxury, seemed to scream of Gatsby's longing, his desperate desire to impress Daisy with the tangible evidence of his success. Yet beneath the surface of opulence, Nick sensed a hollowness, a disconnect between the material splendor and the emotional reality of Gatsby's carefully constructed world. The mansion, for all its grandeur, felt strangely empty, devoid of the warmth and intimacy of a true home. It was as if Gatsby had created a stage set for a life he yearned to live, a life that remained tantalizingly out of reach. As the tour progressed, a palpable shift occurred in the atmosphere. Daisy, initially captivated by the sheer scale of Gatsby's extravagance, seemed to withdraw into herself, her initial delight replaced by a growing sense of unease. The more Gatsby revealed of his material possessions, the more pronounced the distance between them seemed to become. Nick, observing the subtle changes in Daisy's demeanor, sensed that Gatsby's carefully orchestrated display was having the opposite of its intended effect. It was as if the sheer opulence of the mansion, the overwhelming evidence of Gatsby's single-minded pursuit of wealth, served only to highlight the unbridgeable gulf that now separated them. They were no longer the carefree young lovers who had met in Louisville 5 years earlier. They had been shaped by time, by experience, by the choices they had made in the intervening years. Daisy, Now a wife and a mother, her voice full of money, seemed to represent a world that Gatsby could never truly be a part of, no matter how much wealth he amassed. Her life, for all its gilded cages and unspoken disappointments, was rooted in the reality of East Egg, a world of inherited privilege and social standing that Gatsby, with his shadowy past and his nouveau riche extravagance, could only ever observe from the outside. The illusion of control Gatsby's carefully constructed world begins to unravel. As the afternoon wore on, the carefully constructed facade that Gatsby had so meticulously erected began to crumble, revealing the cracks and fissures that lay beneath the surface of his carefully cultivated persona. He knocked over a clock, its delicate mechanism shattering on the marble floor, a symbolic representation of his inability to control time or to recapture the past. His carefully rehearsed speeches dissolved into awkward stammering, his words failing to bridge the chasm that had opened up between him and Daisy. Nick, sensing Gatsby's growing desperation, attempted to steer the conversation towards safer ground, but his efforts proved futile. Gatsby, fixated on Daisy, seemed oblivious to the subtle cues that suggested his carefully orchestrated reunion was veering off course. He pressed on, his voice growing louder, his gestures more exaggerated, as if attempting to compensate for the growing distance between them with sheer force of will. The air in the room crackled with a palpable tension, a sense of impending disaster that not even the lavish surroundings could disguise. Gatsby's carefully constructed world, a world built on the foundation of a single, all-consuming desire, was beginning to unravel, the illusion of control slipping through his fingers like grains of sand. A city sweltering tensions rise in a stifling suite. The oppressive heat of a New York City summer hung heavy in the air, a suffocating blanket that seemed to amplify the simmering tensions between Gatsby, Daisy, and Tom. They had sought refuge from the relentless sun in a luxurious suite at the Plaza Hotel, a gilded cage of opulent indifference that mirrored the emotional turmoil brewing beneath the surface of their forced civility. The air, thick with the scent of stale cigarette smoke and the cloying sweetness of lilies, crackled with unspoken accusations and simmering resentments. Gatsby, his usual composure shaken, paced restlessly, his eyes fixed on Daisy, desperate to gauge her reaction to Tom's thinly veiled barbs and condescending remarks. Tom, sensing Gatsby's vulnerability, pressed his advantage, his voice laced with a sardonic amusement that grated on Nick's nerves. He needled Gatsby about his past, his wealth, his very right to breathe the same air as Daisy, his words a calculated attempt to provoke a confrontation, to expose the cracks in Gatsby's carefully constructed facade. Unveiling the truth accusations and confessions in the Plaza Hotel suite. The charade of civility finally shattered, the unspoken truths that had simmered beneath the surface of the afternoon erupting with the force of a long-dormant volcano. Gatsby, pushed to his limit by Tom's relentless taunts, demanded that Daisy finally acknowledge the depth of their love, to declare her true feelings, to choose between the man she had once loved and the life she had built in his absence. The room fell silent, the air thick with anticipation as all eyes turned to Daisy. She sat motionless, her face pale, her eyes darting between Gatsby and Tom, her composure crumbling under the weight of their expectations. The silence stretched, an eternity ticking by on the ornate clock on the mantelpiece, until finally, with a trembling voice, she spoke. Her words, when they came, were a tangled confession of love and regret, a heartbreaking acknowledgement of the past they had shared and the impossible chasm that now separated them. She had loved Gatsby, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper, but she had also loved Tom, her words a painful reminder of the life she had chosen, the life that Gatsby, for all his wealth and his yearning, could never truly be a part of. The illusion that Gatsby had so carefully constructed, the dream he had nurtured for 5 long years, shattered into 1,000 pieces, the fragments irretrievable, lost in the wreckage of their shattered hopes. Daisy, torn between the allure of the past and the comfort of the familiar, chose the life she knew, the life that offered security and social standing, even if it meant sacrificing the possibility of true love. Gatsby, his face ashen, his shoulders slumped as if bearing an unbearable weight, watched as Daisy retreated from his grasp, her words a finality that echoed in the silence that followed her confession. The truth, stark and undeniable, hung in the air between them. The past could not be recaptured. The dreams they had shared could not withstand the weight of the choices they had made, the lives they had built in each other's absence. Tom, his face flushed with a mixture of triumph and relief, wasted no time in asserting his dominance. He barked out orders, his voice sharp, his words a clear indication that the charade was over, that Gatsby's time in their world, a world he had so desperately craved to be a part of, had come to an end. The drive back from the city was a somber affair, the air thick with unspoken tension and the bitter aftertaste of shattered illusions. The oppressive heat of the day had given way to a stifling humidity, the air heavy with the threat of a storm that mirrored the turmoil raging within each of them. Gatsby, his usual exuberance extinguished, insisted on driving Daisy home in his ostentatious yellow coupe, a final desperate attempt to cling to the remnants of their shattered dream. Nick, sensing the danger that crackled in the air, urged caution, but his words were lost in the roar of the engine as Gatsby sped away, leaving a trail of dust and despair in his wake. Tom, his face a mask of barely concealed rage, followed closely behind in his own car, his eyes fixed on the yellow coupe ahead, his mind racing with thoughts of revenge. The setting sun cast long, ominous shadows across the road ahead, a harbinger of the tragedy that awaited them in the gathering darkness. The green light, once a beacon of hope that had shimmered on the horizon of Gatsby's dreams, now flickered weakly in the encroaching darkness, a fading symbol of a future forever out of reach. Gatsby, his lifeblood staining the pristine waters of his swimming pool, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him, had finally succumbed to the weight of his illusions. The past, he had learned too late, could not be recaptured, its allure a siren song that had led him to a tragic and ultimately futile pursuit of a love that had slipped through his fingers like grains of sand. The Valley of Ashes, that desolate testament to the hollowness of dreams deferred, had claimed them all in its suffocating embrace. Myrtle Wilson, her life a casualty of Tom Buchanan's recklessness and her own desperate longing for a life beyond her reach, lay lifeless on the dusty road, her dreams of escape extinguished beneath the wheels of Gatsby's speeding car. George Wilson, driven to madness by grief and a thirst for vengeance that consumed his soul, had taken his own life, his final act a desperate attempt to right the scales of justice in a world that had shown him little but cruelty and indifference. And Gatsby, the architect of his own demise, lay dead in his opulent mausoleum, a victim of his own unwavering belief in the transformative power of wealth, his heart pierced by the bullet of a man driven to madness by the very same forces of envy and despair that festered beneath the glittering surface of the Roaring Twenties. Nick Carraway, his Midwestern sensibilities shaken to their core by the summer's tragic events, found himself adrift in the aftermath of Gatsby's demise. He'd come to West Egg seeking excitement, adventure, a taste of the intoxicating freedom that seemed to shimmer on the horizon of the Jazz Age. Instead, he had found himself drawn into a vortex of despair, a world where love was a currency to be traded, where dreams were fragile illusions easily shattered by the weight of past mistakes and the corrosive power of wealth. He had witnessed firsthand the casual cruelty of the Buchanans, their lives a testament to the moral bankruptcy of a class that viewed the world as their personal playground, its inhabitants as mere pawns to be manipulated for their own amusement. He had seen the desperate yearning in Gatsby's eyes, the way his entire being seemed to reach out for a past he could never reclaim, a future that would forever elude his grasp. And so, Nick made the only choice he could. He retreated from the gilded cages and suffocating hypocrisy of West Egg, his heart heavy with disillusionment, his mind haunted by the ghosts of those who had been consumed by the summer's tragic events. He was, as he had once described himself, a lone boat against the current, borne ceaselessly back into the past, carrying with him the weight of Gatsby's shattered dreams and the haunting realization that the American dream, for all its allure, could be a cruel and unforgiving mistress. The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald's masterpiece of jazz-age disillusionment, continues to resonate with readers nearly a century after its initial publication. Its enduring legacy lies in its ability to capture the zeitgeist of a particular moment in American history, a time of unprecedented economic prosperity and social upheaval, when the old order was crumbling and the promise of a new world seemed tantalizingly within reach. The novel's exploration of love, loss, class, and the elusive nature of the American dream continues to resonate with contemporary audiences, its themes as relevant today as they were in the Roaring Twenties. Gatsby's relentless pursuit of Daisy, his unwavering belief that he can recapture the past and rewrite his destiny through sheer force of will, speaks to the universal human desire for love, acceptance, and the chance to outrun the mistakes of our past. Yet, The Great Gatsby is also a cautionary tale, a reminder that the pursuit of wealth and social status can be a hollow and ultimately destructive endeavor. Gatsby's lavish parties, his ostentatious displays of wealth, are ultimately revealed as a facade, a desperate attempt to mask the emptiness that gnaws at his soul. In the end, it is the simple things, the enduring power of love and human connection that truly matter, and these, Fitzgerald reminds us, are the very things that money cannot buy.